People, I'm sure, will have different intellectual epiphanies, if you want to call them that, throughout their life, where their preconceived ideas will be questioned or challenged, and beliefs that they have held will be changed. And I think it's awesome when that happens, when you have beliefs that that change, and you're argued into a better position, not by force. If you're forced into it, then it defeats the purpose. But um, I'm talking about Thomas Sowell here. I was aware of Thomas Sowell for quite a while, but it's only about 5 months ago that I read the first book by Thomas Sowell. I'm now on to my seventh book by him, and it just incredible all the way through. 5 stars out of 5, all the way through. The one I'm reading at the moment is Conquests and Conquests and Cultures, and it's absolutely incredible. Um, it takes a look at colonialism in different parts of the world, and looks at the effects of it. Later on, hundreds of years later, whatever, and some of the preconceived ideas that people have about colonialism are very much challenged, and there was a few surprises in there for me as well. Reading Niall Ferguson, I'm very much aware of the other side of the colonialism argument, and people think because I'm Irish that I must be particularly vituperative on this issue, but I'm really not generally. The devil's in the details on some issues. I certainly am, but I like to think I have the hindsight now to be able to look at the other side of the coin. So when a more advanced culture takes over some country with a primitive culture, what happens is the they bring their ideas with them. They bring their superior system of law, of government, of transportation, you name it, road building. They don't want to just move in and massacre and rape the local population. Generally, not the European powers. That's, of course, it happens at times. There have been massacres, and here in Ireland, of course, there have been massacres and genocides by the British, and famines and things that have occurred. This as well has occurred in India and parts of Africa. But as a general rule, that is not what they're setting out to do. They want the local population to cooperate with them so they can have a more effective rule while they are in their country. And if the population is revolting all the time, it's not going to work. That's why sometimes their customs are allowed to be held on to, in some cases, their religion and this and that. So what's very, very interesting is when you look back at countries in Africa that were colonized and countries in Africa that weren't colonized by the European powers. Almost invariably, the countries that were not colonized are far worse off today than the countries that were colonized. And, in hindsight, it makes perfect sense, because when a superior, more advanced culture moves in, they bring with them the things that they have learned over hundreds and maybe even thousands of years. And they don't just take it all when they go, they leave a far superior system than the country had before they arrived. So this is why they are much better off. I'm not saying the people at the time loved this. I mean, of course, they most likely didn't want to be colonized by these people, although some of them, after a while, preferred life under the colonizer. Trade would work more effectively. Transportation, communications, the system of governance, the system of law, all of these things worked far better. and I understand there has been massacres and this and that. So the people at the time, it mightn't have been a great thing, not for everybody. But I'm just saying, when you look back hundreds of years later, you see that in the long run, colonialism is a net positive on a country or whatever. And this doesn't only work with black people. I don't want to be accused of some kind of Eurocentrism or anything like that. When the Romans came to Britain, they didn't conquer Scotland. The Picts were a particularly belligerent people, hard to conquer, a very inhospitable terrain. So they put up a wall. Emperor Hadrian put up a wall. There were several walls. The Antonine Wall is another wall across northern England. And Scotland found itself even more isolated from the rest of Europe and even the rest of Britain. And when the Romans left, England, which was a pretty backward place before they were invaded by the Romans, was a far sophisticated society, much more so than Scotland and the places that hadn't been conquered by the Romans. Now, there was a regress around the year 400 when the Romans left. It took a while for them to really pick up their society and start moving again, but it wasn't long before they did. It was a couple of hundred years before they did. But they wouldn't have been able to do this and get to the heights that they got to if it wasn't for the Romans. And the parts of Britain that was most Romano heavy, if you like, was the southeast. And of course, this was the most advanced and best developed part of the island. We see this all over the world in places where a more advanced culture has come in and conquered a less advanced culture. So, I'm sure some people will be asking, well, why don't you do your own country? Ireland have been the victims of colonialism for a very, very long time. I'm going to do a pretty comprehensive study on whether Ireland is better off because of the Brits or not. It's a very, very touchy subject here in Ireland. There's still an immense anti-British sentiment. I think the whole country is shouting for Italy in the final tomorrow, apart from myself. I think I'm the only Irishman that's actually shouting for England in the final. So I'm going to really study this topic before I make any solid claims about it. And I think that's the way it should be about any topic, but this is particularly sensitive. But the point to make is that colonialism, there is another side to this argument. It's really a bad word. It's a bit like nationalism in this milieu. So colonialism, it's used as a pejorative, and maybe that's justified, but there is definitely another side to that argument, and there, along with all the bad things that came with it, a lot of good things did too, and that conversation is just not had enough.